Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that every piece of clothing you own has disappeared. No shirt, no shoes, no jacket, nothing. At first, it sounds embarrassing, but depending on where you live, it can also be dangerous. And yet, for most of human history, that's exactly how people lived. For hundreds of thousands of years, every human on Earth walked around with nothing but skin. So what changed? Why did humans start wearing clothes? The answer isn't hidden inside an ancient tomb. It isn't carved into a cave wall. And for a long time, scientists had absolutely no idea. The clue that finally solved this mystery came from something so small and unexpected that it sounds almost ridiculous. But we'll get to that in a moment. First, let's go back. Way back. Imagine Africa around 300,000 years ago. The sun is blazing overhead. A group of early humans moves across an open savanna. Their skin is dark and sweat-covered. Their bodies are lean, strong, and perfectly adapted for this environment. They're intelligent, they're cooperative, and they're completely naked. This wasn't strange. This wasn't primitive. It was simply normal. In the warm climate where humans evolved, clothing wasn't necessary. In fact, the human body was already designed to survive there. For generation after generation, people hunted, gathered food, raised children, and slept beneath open skies without ever thinking about clothing. The idea simply didn't exist. But eventually something changed. And figuring out exactly when that happened became one of the strangest detective stories in science. The problem was simple. Clothing doesn't survive. Stone tools can last hundreds of thousands of years. Bones can survive for ages. But fabric rots. Leather decays. Animal hides disappear. Whatever the first humans wore is long gone. Archaeologists searched for answers. They found cave paintings that seemed to show people wearing something, but the images weren't clear. They found ancient sewing needles dating back roughly 50,000 years. That proved people were making clothes by then. But it didn't prove when clothing first appeared. Scientists knew the story had to begin much earlier. The question was how much earlier? For years, nobody had a good answer. Then, someone had an unusual idea. Instead of looking at ancient humans, what if they looked at ancient parasites? It sounds strange, but it turned out to be brilliant. Meet the body louse, a tiny insect that lives almost entirely inside clothing. Not on your skin, not in your hair, inside fabric, in seams, in folds, in the places where clothing stays pressed against the human body. And here's the important part. Body lice evolved from head lice. Before humans wore clothes, there were only head lice. Body lice couldn't exist because they had nowhere to live. No clothing, no body lice. It's that simple. So scientists realized something fascinating. If they could figure out when body lice split away from head lice, they could estimate when humans first started wearing clothes. The lice could reveal what ancient clothing could not. Researchers collected DNA samples from lice around the world. They compared genetic differences. They calculated mutation rates. Then they ran the numbers. The result completely changed the timeline. The evidence suggested that body lice first appeared somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. Think about that. Humans may have been wearing clothes up to 170,000 years ago. Long before cities, long before farming, long before the oldest sewing needle ever discovered. A tiny parasite had preserved evidence that history itself had lost. But why did humans suddenly need clothes? The most likely answer is climate. Around that time, parts of Africa experienced colder periods. Not frozen wastelands, but cold enough to make survival more difficult, especially during long nights, especially at higher elevations. The humans who figured out how to wrap themselves in animal hides had an advantage. They stayed warmer. They survived longer. They raised more children. And once something improves survival, it spreads. At first, clothing was probably simple. A rough animal skin thrown over the shoulders. A hide wrapped around the waist. Nothing fashionable. Nothing impressive. Just practical. But that small invention changed everything. Because not long afterward, humans began leaving Africa. Small groups pushed into the Middle East, then into Asia, then Europe, eventually into some of the coldest environments on Earth, places filled with snow, ice, and freezing winds, places where bare skin alone would never be enough. Without clothing, that migration probably never happens. Without clothing, humanity remains trapped in warm regions. No Arctic settlements, no Siberian explorers, no crossing into the Americas. In a very real way, clothing helped humans conquer, but what's fascinating is that clothing didn't stay practical for long. As soon as humans learned how to survive with it, they began using it to communicate. Archaeologists have found evidence of clothing decorated with beads, shells, pigments, and animal teeth. People weren't just trying to stay warm anymore. They were expressing identity, showing status, signaling belonging. Even thousands of years ago, what you wore told a story about who you were. And in many ways, that hasn't changed. The clothes in your closet do more than protect you from the weather. They tell people something about you, your personality, your interests, your culture, your profession. We've been doing that for tens of thousands of years. Which brings us back to tomorrow morning. Before coffee. Before your phone. Before you think about anything else, you'll probably reach for your clothes, and you won't think twice about it. But hidden inside that ordinary habit is a story that stretches back nearly 170,000 years. A story of survival, adaptation, migration, and one small decision that changed human history forever. Because the first person who wrapped an animal hide around their body wasn't trying to start fashion. They were simply trying to survive the night. They couldn't have known that one day billions of people would repeat that same act every morning. Yet here we are, still doing it, 170,000 years later.